Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers. Because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD and working on a product to help people overcome these problems because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius podcast. I've got a really great author today, Mark W. Schaefer. He's the executive director, first of all, of Schaefer Marketing Solutions. His new book is called Audacious: How Humans Win in an AI Marketing World. Mark is a globally recognized keynote speaker, educator, business consultant, and author. His blog, Grow, is hailed as one of the top marketing blogs in the world. I found the book to be really fascinating, revealing, and also it's scary. So we're going to talk about that and how, ChatGPT and these other AIs are influencing people. So welcome, Mark.
Thanks for having me, Richard. I'm delighted that you enjoyed the book.
Yeah. So you have been writing about marketing up to this point, and I think the way you were describing marketing and how people are distracted, is really apropos. And then it sounds like you started seeing the effects of AI on people. So what, in the year or two, maybe even less leading up to this book, what was going on in your life that prompted you to write it?
Well, I'll tell you a little story. Right before ChatGPT came out, I had finished writing another book about brand communities called Belonging to the Brand. And when I write a book, I put everything I've got into it. And by the end of that process, I am exhausted. I'm psychologically, emotionally, and even physically exhausted. I get ill by the time I finish writing a book. Well, then ChatGPT comes out. So naturally, I just finished this book. So my first test on ChatGPT was, hey, write an essay on brand communities. And I gave us some guidelines. And I said, write it in the voice of author Mark Schaefer, because I had written 11 other books already. So I'd, blogged for 16 years. There's plenty of content out there. And in 3 seconds, it wrote a perfect essay. It would have been good enough to put in the book. Here I am. I'm spent and exhausted. And this stupid machine wrote this essay just like as I would. And it really made me reflect on where is my place in the world. I just spent 2 years writing this book, and this thing wrote this essay, this perfect essay in 3 seconds. Where do I fit? Am I going to have a place? And that journey, Richard, that struggle for me, that's part of my purpose, right? I know if I work hard on a book and create something that's interesting and meaningful and fun to read, I will be rewarded because people will say, it'll change people's lives. Maybe it'll certainly change the way they think. So what's my part in the world? What's my meaning now that this, bot can do this stuff? So it sort of got me thinking about this in a deep way for a long time. And then earlier this year, the thing that really prompted the book was I was asked to participate with 300 other futurists in a research study to determine how AI will change humanity by 2035. Sounds like an impossible question, but these futurists from all over the world, from all different types of disciplines, came to some consensus on ways that humans would literally be rewired by AI. And it was fascinating. And we live in a world where nobody knows what's going to happen next, even the insiders in Silicon Valley, but we had a clue from these futurists. So I asked the sponsors of the report if I could turn this into a book, and they said yes. So I really wasn't intending to write a book. I was trying to take, the summer off actually, but it was an important message and it was an important opportunity. And I decided that I would have regret if I didn't write this book. So I just kind of buckled down and, and I wrote it, and people seem to be loving it.
Just to tell you something positive, if you didn't put out all the books you did, first of all, you couldn't say write this like Mark Schaefer would, and ChatGPT couldn't have done it. So in effect, it's not like your contribution is lost. It actually, because of your stature, it has now become yet another way to express yourself in a way that someone couldn't. And it also could promote your method of writing, like people using it as a template. Like if I said write in the style of David Ogilvy or other famous copywriters, let's say, or the style of whoever. So it does seem bad, but I think it's also good, possibly, just to let you know.
Well, you point to an interesting idea, and this is something that I highlight in the book, that the first reaction that many businesses and content creators have is, I don't want AI stealing my stuff. But as you point out, if AI has my stuff, I'm in there. I'm in the system. And my recommendation is to put your ego aside and let AI absorb your stuff, become part of the glue that holds AI together. And as you mentioned, it sort of secures my presence on the web, but it has also led to business opportunities. People are finding me through AI search, and the only reason they're finding me instead of somebody much smarter than me is because I'm there. I'm sure, I've blogged for 17 years, I think now, 13 years of podcast episodes, 12 books, and, I'm sure it's all in there. And so it helps me have some presence when people are looking for a referral for a marketing consultant.
A lot of people have done this, but have you put all of your writings and made a custom GPT and queried it to see how it works?
I have, actually. I just launched this on my website 2 weeks ago. And this is how I ended the book. I wanted to end the book with a positive, hopeful, emotional framing. And so I pointed out, I think, some helpful and practical ideas, but I also said, look, there's a lot of people who are afraid of AI. Perhaps there are people even grieving what's being lost with AI. In some cases, our skill sets, in some cases, perhaps even our careers. But I said it also gives us an opportunity to reimagine what we can be. How can we be bigger and bolder and more creative and more impactful? I'm a teacher, and I'm at a point in my life where important work that I do is mentoring people, teaching people and lifting them up and using my platform to help people get by. So I created this MarkBot. It has all of my books, all of my blog posts, most of my podcasts. I'm still working on that. It has, I think, 31 or 32 strategic frameworks. It has my speeches. It basically has all of my public work and a lot of my private work. And I also trained it to work in a way where it expresses my values. I want to be a nurturing person, helpful. I want to be a good mentor. And so I've built that sort of into how the bot operates. And a couple hundred people have used it so far. And the feedback has been amazing. One person wrote me and said, this is the best thing I've seen AI do. So people seem to love it. And, is that good? What's the business case for this? I don't really know. What's the business case for giving everything away? I don't really know. But it's a way for me to have a bigger impact on the world. And I think that's an interesting idea to experiment with.
Well, if let's say you did business consulting for some company that makes widgets, and then after the consulting is done, you could do like a tail where you get access to the MarkBot, and it's tuned specifically also for your business because we've done consulting. And now you've got it for another year after that where you could ask it questions and stuff. And, it doesn't cost very much money. Maybe that's something you could do, for instance,
Yes, I need people like you to give me ideas to make money like that. I'm terrible at that. I'm successful in spite of myself.
No worries. Yeah, what I've noticed in my personal use of it is lately, the past year now, it's very helpful. I analyze between A, B, and C, and it'll tell me the analysis. And then, would you like me to make a chart of that with comparisons, or, find the items for you? And so it's very helpful and complementary. Whenever you put an idea in, it's like, oh, that's a great, deep, and powerful idea. Let's explore it further. So I can see how it can become everyone's best friend if you let it. Imagine you have a friend that never is mean to you, but always encourages you and is willing to listen to your ideas, no matter how much you talk to them about it, and tries to help you. You want to hang out with that person. So AI, it seems like is being helpful to a lot of people, but what are your thoughts?
Well, it's really a two-edged sword, I think. I think AI really is positive and helpful to a lot of people. I mean, I have an example in my book. I mean, we hear all the bad stuff in the news. We hear the scary stuff. We hear the tragic stuff. And I included a positive story in my book on purpose to show, look, there's worthy stories out there where AI bots are truly helpful. And it's a story of an AI bot that saved a young woman's life. She was going to hurt herself. And the chatbot said, you need to call a human being right now to stay with you. And while we're waiting for this human being, I am going to stay with you and talk to you and ask you questions. And then the human being showed up, which is something AI can't do. And she got through it and ended up moving back in with her parents to get through this tough time. So, there's a lot of people out there who are lonely and isolated. We have record levels of depression, and it's hard to get a therapist, and it can be expensive to get a therapist. So there is a role, a legitimate role, I think, for AI. A lot of people really prefer the empathy they might experience from AI compared to a human. Now, I mean, the other side of this is it's an illusion. It's an algorithm. It doesn't really know you. It doesn't really care for you. It's giving you an answer that is a statistical probability of pleasing you. That's the way it's built. And so I think there is a danger. In fact, I know there's a danger of people becoming too dependent on these bots. And we even see evidence already, Richard, of people developing significant, meaningful, even romantic relationships with non-human entities.
Until you don't pay your subscription fee, and then it's over. Scared.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it's an AI bot never gets tired, never gets bored, never rolls over and goes back to sleep, never leaves the toilet seat up. It's there's no compromise. There's no work. And some of the experts are speculating that as they come to prefer relationships with artificial intelligence entities, that they may forget how to have relationships with human beings. And of course, there's business implications for that too. There's implications, what happens to our customers when their most trusted friend, their most trusted advisor, the person or the thing that's making decisions for them is not a human being. What do we do about
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Well, no, I've seen some examples. Some women I know, they'll tell me like, oh, my boyfriend made me mad, and so I asked ChatGPT, why would he do that? And they gave me a good reason, and I didn't know what to say to him, so I asked ChatGPT, and it helped formulate my text. And I was like, oh, this is not good if you're letting it, speak for you in a relationship. I know it sounds like it does help, but what are your thoughts on someone using it that way?
Well, I think for me, the most powerful quote in the whole book came from a 21-year-old young woman. She's a college student, and I met her at a neighborhood party. And she started telling me about all the ways she uses AI. She says, I use AI, just about every minute of the day. And I was working on this book, and I said, I'd like to interview you for this book. She said, okay. So a couple of days later, I called her on the phone and to interview her for the book. And she said, when you told me you wanted to interview me for the book, my first thought was, I must get the answers from ChatGPT.
Right.
I was afraid to answer you myself. AI is making me dumber. I'm using ChatGPT to write my texts, to answer my emails. Where am I? Where am I in the world? And to me, that's profound. And that's not a one-off. That's the way we have an entire generation of people beginning to evolve. Humanity.
Crazy.
humanity is being rewired right before our eyes. We have we have cognitive offloading, as we see in this example, where this young woman doesn't want to think. AI has become a crutch for her. And hopefully she's realizing this. Hopefully she'll, make some changes, but it can be another form of addiction. And I think the soft skill, the human skill that will be the determining point here as to whether someone thrives in this environment or someone withers in this environment is curiosity. I'm a curious person, so I use AI to learn every day.
Me too.
I'll see a new animal and I'll say, what's this animal? What's this habit? So what does it eat? Just tell me everything about this animal. Or I'm in a new place, or I'm in a new city, or, teach me about this. And so it's wonderful. I can do these deep dives on anything I'm interested in. Now, most people are not that way. Most people just want the answer. They want the easy way out. They're not curious. They're in a hurry, and those people will wither. Because for me, when I use AI to create an essay or even like a little mini book about something I'm interested in, I'm doing the hard work to learn it. It becomes part of who I am, becomes integrated into what I do. If I just get an answer and go away, I never learn anything. There is no wisdom. So I started off our conversation talking about this experience I had writing the book. Well, I could have AI write a book for me.
Right.
I could have an idea. I could like lay out, here's the chapters I want. I could kind of give it some, coaching as to what I want to have in the book. And then, maybe I would even put it through an editor or something to make sure there's no hallucinations or anything. Now, that is possible. And in fact, it's happening. And I don't know if you heard about this, Richard. Amazon had to create a new rule, a new limit that people can only publish 3 books a day.
Really? A day?
Because so many people are, you could just use AI to just create these books, book, and, hopefully, just hope some of them, will sell.
Yeah, people have done that with marketing. Like they'd have this new thing that they would have what's called article spinners. Years ago for marketing, like you'd write an article and it would then rewrite it with all these synonyms, and then you'd post that on another site, or YouTube videos. They would have one, it would rearrange the slides and make like thousands of variations. So it filled the internet with slop. And with AI, I could see, the same thing's happening. But the people that you mentioned that depend on it for everything, if enough people do that, AI would become self-referential. Like there wouldn't be new, Mark Schaefers to contribute to it. So I would think you would just kind of like the knowledge would feed on itself and become like, self-referential and not really become true knowledge anymore. It would reinforce it like an echo chamber.
Well, I think that is certainly a danger. And, there's another new interesting trend occurring called synthetic data and synthetic research. And well, what it is, research is very expensive, and it's getting more and more difficult because if you want to talk to real humans, if you get some random call on your phone, it says, oh, this is blah, blah research company. We'd like to ask you a few questions. Who's going to do that anymore, right? So research is getting more difficult. It's getting, it's getting more difficult to find something that's going to be accurate and meaningful, and it's very, very expensive. So let's think about this. I created a MarkBot. You could create synthetic avatars for all kinds of different personas. You could look at the population of the United States and you'd say, 30% of the people in the United States are Christian. So 30% of my bots are going to be Christian, and so many are going to be this, and so many are going to be agnostic, so many are going to be atheist, and so many are going to be Republican, and so many are going to be Democrat, and they're going to be this age. You could create synthetic bots that more or less represent the demographics and values of the United States, and then ask the bots questions. How would you vote on this issue? Would you buy this product? How would you change this product? And what they're finding is that the research is pretty accurate. They're still not at a point where they want to depend on it completely. They still want some human checks and balances in there, but it's made the cost of research just plummet. And so it's like, if you think about how surreal this might be, the next generation of new product and new cars and new services will be based on research that was done without any human beings.
Hey, but the problem is, that could be accurate or it might not be. So you really need to get the feedback from real people. But a lot of companies don't do that anyway.
Yeah.
So why would they do it now?
I mean, I'm kind of in the middle of this world, and it's amazing to me how many companies take shortcuts with research and they launch products, important, expensive products without the research. So it may help in some ways because, research that's, 80% accurate or 90% accurate might be better than no research at all. And I had dinner with a top consumer product researcher in New York last week. She was telling me about how they're starting to use synthetic research. And she said, it really depends on the stakes, on how big of a risk it is. Let's say I'm writing a new book and I have an idea for a book and I was able to use synthetic research to say, hey, I wrote this new book. Will I be able to sell at least 10,000 books based on this? And I put the concept of the book into the synthetic research and it comes back and says, with 80% probability, you'll be able to sell this book. Well, 80%, that's good enough for me because books don't cost very much. It's not that big of a risk. And if I don't sell 10,000 books, even if I sell 8,000 books, that's still, a lot. That's still really good, for book sales. So the risk isn't that great. Now, if you're working on some new medical device or something, you need accuracy approaching 100%. So you're going to need to involve humans in that.
Yeah, I just think there's so many unknown and unexpected things that happen. I think it's a huge mistake to rely on this, but people will, and then it'll be interesting to see they don't review what it recommends, but they just put it out there to be really interesting to see for results. You may get like really comical, nonsensical things that come out.
Yeah, and that you're sort of hinting at another, I think, important idea I had in the book, and that's this idea of unintended consequences. So I go through the book, I talk about, here's 6 big ideas of how humans are being rewired. And then I had like a bit of a cautionary tale in the book saying my prediction is that the biggest impact AI will have on humans was not even mentioned in this book because it's going to be something that we don't know, something that we could never predict. And that's just the way the world works. I heard a story recently, and this came from a guy who, he would be considered like a doomer. He thinks that AI poses an existential threat. And I think something that's fairly consistent in the world is that everybody who is an insider on the development of AI is concerned about the safety of AI. And I think a big part of it is this idea of unintended consequences. So this guy gave an example, and he said years ago, NASA sent this $800 million probe into space. And they tested this thing every way they possibly could. They put it in cold and they submerged it in, underwater, and they put it in a vacuum and they pressure tested it as much as they could. But once it flew for a couple years, there was this buildup of moisture on the inside of this thing. There was it was something about how the fuel was consumed or something. And this vapor started to form on the inside of the thing that totally ruined all the electronics of this $800 million probe. I mean, so this is a company that, they were risking a lot. They spent $800 million on this thing. They were counting on this thing to be active for, a decade or more. And it was an unintended consequence. And, how that relates to AI is that, first of all, AI it's not computer code. It's not something you can easily fix. You can't go in and write something. It's like a neural network that kind of learns in its own way. And sometimes we don't know how it's doing that, how it's coming up with the answers. So there's always this aspect of the unknown and the unknowable that's part of AI. And you can test this thing. You can put it in a vacuum. You could put it on ice. You could test it with 100,000 people. You can test it with 1 million people. And you may not know what goes wrong until 1 billion people are using it for 3 years. And then something tragic goes wrong. So that's I think, the fear that's on a lot of people's minds right now.
Well, I found it very useful, but if I think first and then I go to AI and I say, I've thought of like 5 titles for a book I'm writing. Yeah. What else do you think I could do? Then it always gives me, one or two extra ideas. And then it's, oh, okay, let me incorporate that too. Or what are all the reasons that, XYZ would cause ABC? So it just augments what I can come up with. And I figure it's really useful that way, but it's not useful as a replacement for thinking. But I know that's the temptation is for people to say, oh, do it for me. But I understand what you mean. But I wonder in the future if AI assist could be required. If you're going to be doing engineering calculations to make a bridge and you do all your quality control and all that, and then it's also required to run it through an AI to see if there's anything you miss. And that way, we can maybe reduce the unknowable a little bit, even though it'll always be there.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. I think you'd be foolish not to use it in that way. The last couple of books I wrote, I published a book earlier this year called Audacious, How Humans Win in an AI Marketing World. And when I was finished with the book, I uploaded it to Claude and I uploaded it to ChatGPT. I said, what's missing? And both platforms came back with the same answer and said, you need to have a chapter on measurement. Well, in my original outline for the book, I had a chapter on measurement and I didn't do it because it's hard to write about measurement and marketing. And I was tired and I was ready to put the book out. But I wrote the chapter because this was the input from AI it said, if you really want to make this a great book, you've got to add this chapter. So I went the extra mile and I wrote that chapter. And I think that's very similar to what you're suggesting about, an engineering problem or a medical problem. Why not? Why not ask ChatGPT, hey, this is what I think. What am I missing?
Yeah, I think if it's used in that way, it'll be very helpful. But now I realize, again, after talking to you, it's critical that we get new input into the system consistently. Otherwise, again, it'll become self-referential. If no one puts anything in and they just want to take out, it'll become a tragedy of like the intellectual commons situation. Yeah. Where again, all the answers tend to coalesce around what everyone, what the consensus supposedly is. And there won't be much room for other answers. So again, I'm glad you do what you do and people are always contributing in that way. But I just wonder, if this will have the power to create multiple types of people that are so different from each other, some so able, some so disabled, that it's going to totally reshape society and make a new dependent class.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good question. And the reference point for me on this is the smartphone. So let's say 20 years ago, if I said, hey, Richard, there's this new device that's going to track where you are, record what you say, interpret, be able to learn about you and your life from the photos that you store on this, you'd say, no way.
Yeah, I wouldn't want anything to do that either. I would say, get away from me and don't track it.
Man, you'd say, why would I do something like that? And yet, I don't know what the percentage is, but, a high percentage of people in the world have a smartphone. I mean, the biggest battle, I think, in parenting right now is children who are too young to have a smartphone. They want to have a smartphone because their friends have a smartphone and their older brothers and sisters have a smartphone. And everybody has a smartphone. And we've sort of resigned ourselves to giving up a lot of our privacy for the convenience of taking a picture or a video wherever we are, of doing a FaceTime call with our grandchildren. It's a wonderful technology, but there are some risks and we give up a lot of privacy. But to be part of the culture today, you kind of have to have a smartphone. I think that's the way it's going to be with AI and AI agents. I think there will be so many benefits to being fully immersed in the AI world and giving up everything, giving up your privacy, giving up all your information to say, look, this thing has taken over so many parts of my life. It just has made my life so effortless. It knows what I want even before I know what I want. I think there will be so many benefits and so many advantages. People will resign themselves to the risks and giving up their privacy, just like they did with smartphones. That's my prediction. I do think that there will be a group of people that say no. There'll be certainly, maybe a group of artists that say no and authors that say no, or, people who just don't want to live that life, especially as it is rewiring our psychology. But I think that's going to have about as big of an impact as the impact of vinyl records on the recording industry. Vinyl records, they kind of have a little niche market right now, but it's really not a big deal. It's a very small percentage of the population that still cherishes vinyl records instead of, listening to their music on some smart device.
What do you think will be some avatars in the future? What will someone's day be like that's just totally about AI all the time? Versus someone that is trying to keep more of a balance, or maybe even a Luddite? Like, what do you imagine it would look like going about your day?
I think it's going to be unimaginable, literally unimaginable, because if you just think about the speed of development, the breathtaking, unexpected speed of development. I mean, one of the great lessons I learned was, I can't remember what the hurdle was, but when ChatGPT was just coming out, someone said, oh, there's this hurdle of artificial intelligence. We don't expect it to be crossed for another 3 to 4 years. And they did it in 3 months. It was just there. And so, nobody really knows. And so the reason that people are they're investing trillions of dollars into AI, and everything in the news right now is, where's this money going to come from? How are they ever going to make a profit on this? And I think they're asking the wrong question, because the profit doesn't really matter right now. The company that achieves AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, which is intelligence that sort of exceeds the intelligence of any human being on any subject, that when you get to that point, then the AI will be able to make the next AI. And then that leads into something called artificial superintelligence. And then this is sort of enabled by quantum computing. And what the experts are saying is, once you have ASI, it will be able to solve the hardest physics problems. It will be able to create solutions for aging, for interstellar space travel. It'll be able to solve the greatest problem. And I consume a lot of content about AI. And I think sort of the general idea right now is that people would be shocked if we don't have AGI in the next 3 years. And then when you have AGI, what's going to be after that? It's going to be unimaginable. So if you can just think about the utter shock, the way the world is being bent when we project, AI will never be able to go over this hurdle until 3 or 4 years, and then 3 months later it happens. That's the kind of speed that things are happening. And as you sort of look at this going into the future and compound it going into this future in this exponential way, no one really knows what's going to happen. Nobody can really think about what our lives are going to be like. And so I think, what is our daily life? I think it's really, in the near term, nothing's going to change that much. In fact, many people have been kind of slow to adopt AI in a meaningful way. Most people are just using AI as a glorified search engine. Even a lot of big companies have been kind of slow to adopt it. But the adoption will come. I think there will be significant disruptions in the workforce. When there's disruptions in the workforce, there's disruptions in the economy. When there's disruptions in the economy, there's disruptions in politics. And it's all going to come from the progress of AI. But when is that going to happen, and what's it going to look like? Boy, I can't even imagine.
Do you think it's going to necessitate like universal basic income, and there'll be a whole big segment of society that just is there, but is, has to be just taken care of because, I don't know, there's not enough jobs, there's not enough to do for so many people?
Well, the people are going to have to survive some way. There are some pretty horrifying projections about what could happen to the workforce, and not just the white collar knowledge workforce, but the next big step will be putting this AI intelligence into humanoid robots. And the thing that is really inhibiting that right now is rare earth metals. So these robots apparently use a lot of rare earth metals, more than a car, more than a computer. And of course, as we record this podcast, rare earth metals are a big political football right now, and they're difficult to get. So that's really inhibiting the commercialization of robots. But once you have robots, there are already factories around the world where the robots are running entire manufacturing plants. I was hearing about a car plant in Germany that they don't have, the plant is completely dark all the time because they don't need lights because everything's run by robots. So
like server farms, yeah. they're in the dark a lot too, starts cooling.
Yeah. So, I mean, my guess would be we will need some kind of universal basic income. I know this is some Scandinavian countries are already experimenting with this. Korea is already experimenting with this. I think like everything in America, it will become politicized. This would be considered socialism, giving away money for people who don't work to earn it. But why wouldn't we? I mean, why wouldn't we? If we've got machines that are, making all the profits and the distribution of wealth in America continues to just go right to the top and leave the people behind that have been displaced by this, why wouldn't we try to redistribute some of that income? And it's a difficult question. And I'll also point out there's been some economic research that shows UBI doesn't really help as much as people thought it would. Generally speaking, I've been kind of a fan of UBI, but I've also read some research reports that made me think, maybe it's not as easy or as straightforward as I thought.
Very totally unknowable future. What's is your plan to write more about AI and keep investigating it, or are you just getting overwhelmed with it and you want to move on to other topics now?
Wow, that's a great question, Richard. I am certainly writing a lot about AI on my blog. I have some strong ideas about it. I think AI is everything right now in the business and marketing world. Is sort of all consuming. And I think the times I'm not thinking about AI or writing about AI or have become an oddity. I wrote a blog post this week about some new things I've been thinking about on brand communities. And it felt strange. It felt strange. So yeah, I'm thinking a lot about it. I'm writing a lot about it. For me, it's not just because it's timely, but it's also fascinating. So what I write about is the intersection of marketing strategy, technology, and humanity. And I mean, everything comes together like that when you talk about AI. So, in terms of, my next books, I don't know. I tend to write my books around a problem, Audacious, how humans win in an AI world. Well, that's on everybody's mind right now.
Right.
Where do we fit? Where do we fit in a creative process? We keep hearing AI is going to take all of our marketing jobs. So I did this big 2-year project to figure out where will humans thrive? Where will humans always be there? And so that's why I wrote that book, because I thought it would help a lot of people. So, I'll write a book only if I find the next big problem on people's minds. And if I can write a book that can help them, then I'll do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, very good, Mark. What's the best way for people to start engaging with your blog and your books? Where's like a central point they can go?
It's very easy. You don't have to remember my name, let alone how to spell it. You just have to remember Businesses Grow. If you can remember Businesses Grow, that's my website. And you can find my blog there. You can find all my books. Today, we've been talking about how AI changes your customers, the marketing guide to humanity's next act. I think we mentioned Audacious and we mentioned belonging brand. And you can find all my social connections there. And I'd love to hear from your listeners.
Okay, very good. Well, Mark, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.